आप सबके सहयोग के साथ आगे बढ़ाते रहेंगे। आप सबका बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
All right, so those were the closing remarks of Prime Minister Narendra Modi in the inaugural session of the third Voice of Global South Summit, and collective importance and challenges were put forward, and it clearly depicts that Global South is together, as reaffirmed by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. He further said that they together have found a common way towards the pathway to progress, and Global Development Compact has also been proposed by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, whose foundation will be based on India's growth journey. This will be multidimensional in approach, trade for development, capacity building for sustainable growth, technology sharing, etc. can be focused through this global compact. Trade and promotional activities will also get a boost through this, in which India will initiate a $2.5 million fund, and apart from that, $1 million fund will be allocated for capacity training. And now it's time to quickly take top headlines of the hour in DD India Live. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi called for unity among Global South nations as India hosts third edition of Voice of Global South Summit virtually. US President Joe Biden says Gaza ceasefire deal is closer but not there yet, as Gaza ceasefire talks paused with resumption planned next week. Ukraine destroys key bridge in Russia's Kursk region, hindering evacuations. Zelensky hails Russia's losses in Kursk region as very helpful for Ukraine's defense. US Vice President and Democratic presidential nominee Kamala Harris unveils economic plan. In a major policy speech, pledges to cut taxes, support expanded child tax credits. Good afternoon. You're watching DD India Live. To begin with the top story of the day, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi called for unity among Global South nations during the opening ceremony of third Voice of Global South Summit on Saturday. With the theme, An Empowered Global South for a Sustainable Future, the summit envisaged bringing together countries of the Global South. The summit also hosted Now the summit, which has been hosted by India, acted as a responsible and a platform to expand discussions held in the previous summits on a range of complex challenges that continue to affect the world, such as conflicts, food and energy security crisis, along with climate change.
और अनिश्चितता का माहौल है। हम क्लाइमेट चेंज की चुनौतियों का सामना तो कर ही रहे हैं, और अब हेल्थ सिक्योरिटी, फूड सिक्योरिटी और एनर्जी सिक्योरिटी की चिंताएं भी है। आतंकवाद, अतिवाद और अलगाववाद हमारे समाजों के लिए गंभीर खतरा बने हुए हैं। टेक्नोलॉजी डिवाइड और टेक्नोलॉजी से जुड़ी नई आर्थिक और सामाजिक चुनौतियां भी सामने आ रही हैं।
Prime Minister Narendra Modi further pointed out that there is an atmosphere of uncertainty all over the world, but the Global South nations should be prepared to face all the challenges.
मानवीय संकट के समय भारत एक फर्स्ट रिस्पॉन्डर की तरह अपने मित्र देशों की सहायता कर रहा है। चाहे पापुआ न्यू गिनी में ज्वालामुखी फटने की घटना हो या कीनिया में बाढ़ की घटना, हमने गाजा और यूक्रेन जैसे कॉन्फ्लिक्ट क्षेत्रों में भी मानवीय सहायता प्रदान की है।
And to get a quick recap of the closing remarks, I'm joined by DD India correspondent Amrit Pal Singh. Amrit, when we look at the closing remarks of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, this seems to be a good beginning in the first session itself with the allocation of funds in the name of Global Development Compact. How do you assess this beginning or at the third Global Voice of Global South Summit, Amrit?
I think that was a significant announcement that the Prime Minister made. He said that after listening to the various leaders who spoke at the leaders' meeting this morning, the Prime Minister said that factoring all that, India proposes a global development compact which will address the needs of the global South. He said that India will pledge a $1 million fund to it, and it needs to be taken further at the global summit, which is going to be held at the Summit of the Future, which is going to be held next month at the UN headquarters. Primarily saying that the developmental needs can provide a financial allocation for that. For example, he spoke about saying that the country, this forum will act as negotiators for best practices of trade which are favorable to the global South. And not just that, but which will act as a counterweight to international financial lending institutions, which lend, but it finally leads to a debt trap, as we've seen in many of the global South countries go down that way. So he said in those hours of crisis, this would come handy, and this needs to go further. So I think this is an idea that India has proposed. It needs the global South countries. There would be a reasonable a sense of consensus on that, that the Prime Minister chose to announce this at the closing of the Leaders Summit.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much, Amrit, for joining us and bringing us a rounded perspective on the closing remarks of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Moving on, U.S. Deputy Secretary of State for Management and Resources, Richard R. Verma, is leading a delegation to Nepal and India to advance and support a prosperous, secure and resilient future for both the countries. During his visit to India from the 17th of August, Deputy Secretary Verma will meet with senior government officials, climate leaders, aerospace academics and industry representatives. Discussions will be held on a range of issues including economic development, clean energy, climate action and STEM education. He will be joined in by Senior Advisor to the President for International Climate Policy, John Podesta, and Deputy Secretary of the U.S. Department of Energy, David Tock. As Dominican Republic leader Luis Abinader resumed his second four-year term as the president on Friday, India's Union Minister of State for External Affairs, Babitra Margarita, felicitated Luis Abinader. Margarita further said that India is looking forward to work with Abinader and his government to further strengthen bilateral relations between Delhi and Santo Domingo. Now, Sabarmati Express 19168 going from Varanasi to Ahmedabad derailed at the holding line ahead of Govindpuri. Immediately after the incident, top officials of the railways, police and fire departments reached the spot and started relief and rescue operations. No passenger, however, have been reported injured in the accident. Railway teams reached the spot and are working to bring the coaches back on track. A team of railway experts has started investigation to find out the cause of the accident. India's Minister of Railways, Ashwini Vaishnav, confirmed that there were no injuries reported due to the accident. On social media platform, he said, and I quote his tweet here, "The engine of Sabarmati Express Varanasi to Ahmedabad hit an object placed on the track and derailed near Kanpur at 2:35 a.m. today, according to Indian Standard Time. Sharp hit marks are observed. Evidence is protected. IB and UP police are also working on it. No injuries to passengers or staff. Train arranged for passengers for onward journey to Ahmedabad," unquote. The Indian Medical Association has withdrawn the services by doctors of modern medicine across the country in solidarity against the brutal rape and murder at R.G. Kar Medical College and Hospital in Kolkata. According to a statement from IMA, the service will be withdrawn till 6 a.m. according to Indian Standard Time till Sunday. The statement further said that all essential services will be maintained, casualties will be manned, but routine OPDs will not function. Moving on, the ferry Sivagangai completed its maiden journey from Nagapattinam to KKS, marking a significant step in strengthening ties through enhanced maritime connectivity, fostering P2P ties and boosting economic collaboration. The passenger ferry service between India and Sri Lanka has resumed on Friday. The ferry Sivagangai completed its maiden journey between Nagapattinam and KKS in up to 4 hours with around 50 passengers on board. The passengers were welcomed at the KKS port by the Consul General of India at Jaffna. In order to make service more affordable for the passengers, Government of India has decided to provide financial assistance of over 25 million LKR per month for a period of 1 year to cover relevant charges and operating cost at Nagapattinam port. Nepal's Minister for Communications and Information Technology, Prithvi Subba, inaugurated the RSS Media Museum established at the Central Office of Rashtriya Samachar Samiti on Friday. During the event, Gurung urged the journalists to play constructive roles to make the government answerable to the general public. He also expressed concern over what he called free journalism becoming confined to person-centered criticism in recent times, as against its universal principles of truthfulness, factuality and fairness. The museum is set to support the study and research of media development in Nepal. Indeed, India Live. Now it's time to take a look at other stories making news around the country. Ghazla Manzoor, a female entrepreneur from Kupwara, a border district in Jammu and Kashmir, has made significant strides in the field of digital education. Recognizing the lack of educational resources and opportunities in a region for the youth, Ghazla bridged this gap by launching a digital education initiative. Her efforts focus on equipping young people with the necessary skills and knowledge. About 100 children from Raipur were given a unique and educational guided trip to the dense forests of the area. This initiative aimed at providing these young minds with an opportunity to explore and learn about the rich biodiversity and natural heritage of their surroundings, which are often inaccessible to many due to region's challenging terrain and socio-economic conditions. Indore is set to create a remarkable tribute to Lord Ganesha by crafting the world's largest Rakhi. This unique endeavour, led by devotees, aims at honouring the deity during Ganesh Chaturthi festival in an extraordinary way, reflecting the deep cultural and spiritual significance of the occasion. Once completed, this colossal Rakhi will be presented to prominent Ganesh idol in the city, symbolising community's collective prayers and wishes. Time to take a short break, but still to come on DD India Live. Mpox claims more than 500 lives in the Democratic Republic of Congo, spreads to neighbouring countries in East Africa. Live. Now, Gaza ceasefire talks in Doha paused on Friday with negotiators to meet again next week. In a joint statement, the US, Qatar and Egypt said Washington had presented a new proposal that built on points of agreement over the past week, closing gaps in a way that could allow rapid implementation of a deal. Mediators would keep working on the proposal. Sarah Coates has more from Tel Aviv.
It appears as though progress has been made, although these mediating parties say gaps still remain, but it does remain unclear as to what these gaps actually are. But certainly what we can expect throughout the next week are these mediating parties to once again come together and really try and get this deal over the line. Now, we do have a statement from Qatar, the United States and also Egypt. It says that both sides were presented with a proposal that narrows the gaps between the parties while being consistent with the principles laid out in the plan presented by President Biden in May. Well, a senior official from our governments will meet again in Cairo before the end of next week, hoping to reach an agreement on the terms set out today, adding there's no time to waste and no excuses for further delay that can be accepted by any party. Now, in the wake of this statement being released, the Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, he spoke with his counterpart Lloyd Austin in the United States, and they've been speaking about a moral and strategic imperative to actually get this deal done, and also, of course, this ongoing coordination with this threat of an Iranian attack on Israel looming. Now, what we can expect over the coming days is the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken to make yet another wartime visit to the Middle East. He's understood to be visiting Qatar, Egypt, and then also landing here in Tel Aviv. Reporting from Tel Aviv, I'm Sarah Coates for DD India.
Meanwhile, US President Joe Biden said on Friday that the ceasefire deal is closer, but it is not there yet.
One of the reasons I was late for you all was I was dealing with the ceasefire effort in the Middle East. And we are closer than we've ever been. I don't want to jinx anything, but as my grandfather would say, with the grace of God, good little neighbors, a lot of luck, we may have something. But we're not there yet. But it's much, much closer than it was 3 days ago. So keep your fingers crossed.
US Secretary of State Antony Blinken is set to arrive in Israel on Sunday and is set to meet with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. It reported that Blinken would possibly make other stops in Cairo and Doha as well. Meanwhile, the UN Secretary General has called for an urgent pause in fighting so that more than 600,000 children can be vaccinated against polio. DD India's Jody Jacobs has more from New York.
Very little is known about the trip at this stage, with Antony Blinken having earlier this week postponed a trip to the Middle East over heightened security concerns in the region and a possible retaliation attack from Iran against Israel. Fresh mediated negotiations between Israel and Hamas started this week, spearheaded by the United States, Qatar and Egypt. On Friday, the three countries issuing a statement saying they've presented a final proposal to the parties for a ceasefire and hostage deal that they hope can be agreed upon by the end of next week. Meanwhile, here at the United Nations, calls are ever increasing for a ceasefire after more than 10 months of intense fighting in the Gaza Strip. Addressing reporters here in New York, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres called for warring parties in Gaza to lay down their arms so that humanitarians can safely vaccinate more than 500,000 children against polio.
A successful polio vaccination campaign needs safety. Safety for health workers to do their jobs, safety for children and families to get to the health facilities, and safety for those health facilities to be protected from bombardment. I am appealing to all parties to provide concrete assurances right away, guaranteeing humanitarian pauses for the campaign.
Polio virus was recently detected in sewage samples in 2 locations in the Gaza Strip. The disease, which can cause paralysis, the world body says, is now circulating in the enclave and putting thousands of children at risk. The World Health Organization is planning to launch a 2-phase campaign to vaccinate thousands of children under the age of 10. But this can only happen if the safety of healthcare workers can be guaranteed and will involve more than 700 teams at hospitals and primary health centers, many barely functioning. Jody Jacobs in New York reporting for DD India.
As Russia-Ukraine entered the 11th day of fierce fight in the Russian border region of Kursk, Ukrainian forces have destroyed a bridge over the same river in Kursk region. Kursk Regional Governor Alexei Smirnov said Ukraine had destroyed the road bridge in region's Glashkov district, where a mass evacuation is underway. Citing Russian security officials, Russia's state news agency claimed that the bridge's destruction could hinder the relocation of Glashkov's 20,000 inhabitants. On the other hand, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said on Friday that Russia was suffering losses and that were very helpful for Ukraine's defense.
There have already been several reports from Commander-in-Chief Syrskyi on the frontline situation and our operation in the Kursk region. We see that the occupier is suffering losses, and this is beneficial, very beneficial for our defense. This includes the destruction of Russian army's logistics and depletion of their reserves. We must inflict maximum damage on all Russian positions, and we are doing so.
Це Покровський напрямок.
U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris outlined proposals to cut taxes for most Americans, ban price gouging by crossers and build more affordable housing on Friday as part of the opportunity economy she plans to pursue if she wins the White House. In her first major economy-focused speech as the Democratic presidential nominee, Kamala Harris pledged to introduce a new child tax credit of as much as $6,000 for families with infants, cut taxes for families with kids, and lower prescription drug costs. The Vice President also called for the construction of 3 million new housing units over 4 years and a tax incentive for home builders who build homes for first-time buyers. Harris also told the supporters at a rally in North Carolina, a state that she hopes to win in the November 5th election, that the U.S. economy was strong but prices were still too high. She said she would be laser-focused on middle class if she becomes the president.
President, I will be laser focused on creating opportunities for the middle class that advance their economic security, stability, and dignity. Together, we will build what I call an opportunity economy. Building up the middle class will be a defining goal of my presidency, because I strongly believe when the middle class is strong, America is strong.
An outbreak of mpox has claimed more than 500 lives in the Democratic Republic of Congo and spread to neighboring countries in East Africa, raising fears of the global spread of the viral disease. The World Health Organization recently declared the outbreak as a public health emergency of international concern in order to help curb the disease from spreading further. TD India correspondent Chris has more from Kinshasa.
The outbreak of mpox that has been raging in the Democratic Republic of Congo has caused a crisis in the country and the African region. More than 15,000 cases and 548 deaths have been recorded in the DRC since the beginning of the year. A new strain of the virus that is more severe than the one reported globally in 2022 was discovered earlier this year in eastern DRC. The strain known as Clade 1b has now spread to Burundi, Kenya, Rwanda and Uganda. That prompted the World Health Organization to declare the mpox outbreak a public health emergency of international concern. This is the second time the WHO has made that declaration, which is meant to enable it to mobilize resources and coordinate the response. The DRC health minister says the government is stepping up awareness campaigns and has come up with a national plan for vaccination. Earlier this year, the country approved the use of 2 mpox vaccines to curb the spread of the disease. But the vaccines have not arrived in the country. The U.S. Department of Health has promised to donate 50,000 doses of vaccines to the DRC. The country's healthcare system has been destroyed by decades of conflict and corruption. Authorities are now relying heavily on the support of international health organizations to contain the mpox outbreak. Chris Sochamringa in Kinshasa, reporting for DD India.
In sports, Vinesh Fogart returned home following her disqualification from the recently concluded Paris Olympics. Vinesh had earlier assured India of a medal after reaching the final of women's 50 kg weight category in wrestling at Paris Olympics. However, things took an unfortunate turn when she was disqualified for being 100 grams overweight during the second weigh-in on the day of a gold medal match. Vinesh's homecoming has been long awaited, hence thousands of supporters gathered at the New Delhi airport to give her a rousing reception. Security at the airport has also been increased to control large gathering of the people. On to tennis now. British number 2 Cameron Norrie withdrew from the US Open due to a lingering forearm injury that also kept him out of the Olympics. Cameron Norrie, who sits at the 47th rank in PIF ATP rankings, has not played since mid-July, where he lost to Rafael Nadal by 6-4 and 6-4. Cameron stated that he plans to take some rest and recharge and added that he can't wait to get back to competing. Due to lingering injury, he was sidelined from representing his country at the Paris Olympics. His best result at the US Open in 2022 came when he reached the fourth round before losing to Andrei Rublev in straight sets. And that's all for this edition of DD India Live, but do let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. For those on the go, you can get all the latest news and updates from the country and the world on DD India mobile app. The app is available on both Android and iOS platforms. Scan the QR code on the screen to download it right now. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I am Deepika Mehta, and from all of us here in New Delhi, thank you so much for watching DD India Live. Namaskar.